Hi, Mr. Justin. Do I say my last name?
Hey, Justin.
Okay. So for the expanded definitions, you said, or we got an email from you that said the expanded definitions were extended till last night.
I did?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, then none of you should be getting 10% deductions. I forgot. Okay. Marilyn, I take that back. Turn it in. As long as it was turned in by last night, you won't get a 10% deduction. We'll check on that. Thank you, Justin. I noticed yours, by the way. They were very well done. I do remember grading yours.
Oh, thank you.
But you got a 10% deduction, I know.
I did it for him.
And I'm sorry that I lied to you.
For the midterm, I think you also sent another email that said you would extend it till this Friday, November 4th. I'm pretty. I don't remember.
Now we'd extended it already once, and then we extended it again. So no, that was very, very clear that the midterms were extended to the 31st. Remember, we talked about that on the bus as well.
Yep.
Okay? So if you missed them, then you need to tell us why that was. But you guys, I think we were super clear in our little discussion on the bus that it was open till Monday night, last night. All right.
Mr. Slade?
Yes, who's that?
Doesn't know.
This is Garrett.
Oh, Garrett,
I
hi.
just had a question. I didn't do the quiz 3A, and I didn't know it was a thing until like after it was graded over the break. I think I sent you an email on this, so I was wondering if I could do that.
Yeah, okay, so this is what we just had the discussion with Granite Hills. Remember, the deal was I wanted you guys to really do the midterms. If you do well on those and I see good effort, then we'll be negotiating on opening some of those others up, okay? I might, because I'm an easy pushover, I might open some of them up yet. But we're going to discuss that between all of the instructors, because one thing you guys can easily do is you can play one side against the other. So we're just going to make sure that Mr. Huff and I are going to be chatting about it tomorrow. You guys just need to be clear to Mr. Huffine or to Mrs. Pike as to which ones you've missed and why. And some of, like Alicia said, I didn't know they were up, and you guys are still learning how to use the blackboard. All of that's okay, but that has to stop at some point. So we're going to do one more round of fix-its, but it's really going to be based on a lot on how well you engaged in the midterm, because I'm assuming if you didn't engage in the midterm, then you're not that passionate about doing this. Okay, so we'll be discussing that with your instructors to make certain of that. Okay, we got to move on. I want to introduce Kirby Brill. So he's the general manager of Mojave Water Agency. If you missed the lecture yesterday, Mojave Water Agency manages our water up here. And Kirby's basically going to talk to us a little bit about how that happens. So over to Kirby.
All right. Thank you, Neville. Okay. Good morning, everybody. Good morning, AE. Good morning, Granite Hills. If you can hear me, raise your hand. All good? Awesome. Okay. Good morning, everyone. Okay, like Neville said, I'm the general manager of the Mojave Water Agency. I've been up here since about 2000, so a little over 15 years. We're going to get into exactly what we do as I go through my presentation, but essentially, yeah, we manage our entire water supply, and for the primary goal of making sure we got enough for you guys and your kids and your grandkids as well. We look out 40, 50 years, we anticipate what kind of water demands we may have, and we try to make sure we have enough supplies. So with that, a quick overview, there's a lot I'm going to go through, and so we're going to move through it pretty rapidly. But first, Neville, you want to, or let's see, no, I guess I can advance here.
Oh, yeah. You can do that, and I'll be ready for the middle one.
Oh, I need to go into presentation mode, though.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
Great, okay. And I'm good. Okay, so first slide, just a little bit of context. Kind of why is all this important? Like I said, we're required by the state of California to put together these reports and documents, and we're mandated to do estimates out a minimum of 20 years estimate how much water we have available, and really is it enough. And we're going to go through our local water supplies. That's a picture of the Forks Dam right there. That's a picture of the State Water Project. We're going to dive into that a little bit more. We're looking to estimate demands, residential demands. We have agricultural demands in our service area. We also have environmental or riparian demands that need water in our service area. Also, in our planning, we have to anticipate droughts. And overall, our goal in this document and our planning is to really balance supplies and demands. You're going to hear the word sustainable or sustainability a lot as I move through my presentation. That's a Neville word, isn't it? Okay, I can tell by the laughter. But no, this is really a common theme you're going to see in California. This is really a new paradigm, and I'm going to dive into that a little bit more. There's three basic parts that I'm going to go through. One is I'm going to refer to as surface water. That's our natural supply in our local area. That's what Mother Nature gives us. We have ways of measuring that. That's going to be part one. Part two is going to be our groundwater management system. And there's a shot there of a court adjudication. I'm going to drill into that in a little bit. Then the third part that I'm going to also talk about is our imported supply. Mojave Water Agency is also a state water contractor, and with that we have access to the State Water Project as a supplemental supply. I'm also going to drill into that, and that's going to be part three. Okay, so let's go back to part one, our local supply, our local watershed. If you can kind of see this, these are all local drainages that come off of the Lake Arrowhead, the Lake Gregory, and you'll see in there Cedar Springs Dam, Mojave River Dam, and I'm going to kind of dive into a little bit. But this is where we get our natural supply. This is where we get our runoff from the north side of the San Bernardino Mountains, and it flows in to the Mojave River, and a lot of that water sinks underground, and that essentially replenishes our aquifers.
Kirby, there is a pointer. It's the very front.
Okay. So dash.
Very front button. Should have a red on.
Okay, there we go. Got it. Okay, in general, this is a schematic of how our water system works and kind of how much comes from each drainage. You can see on the top there is Silverwood Lake, and it flows into West Fork. You can see about 23% of our total supply comes in out of the Silverwood drainage. Another 10% comes in out of the Horseheap Canyon. Those combine into going to the West Fork, and about 67%, about 2/3, comes from the Deep Creek drainage. And both of those confluence together just above the Forks Dam, and that flows into the Mojave River. Again, I'm going to drill into some of these in just a moment here. Here's some of a picture. This is looking, I believe this is looking west. And you can see Cedar Springs Dam or Silverwood Lake off in the distance there. Just on the lower right is what's called the Forks Dam. There's actually two dams. And you can see the Deep Creek drainage come in here. And again, the West Fork runs down from Silverwood Lake down through Summit Valley. Here's another shot of Cedar Springs Dam. You can see the spillway on the top, and there's also a little outlet structure right there. This is part of the State Water Project. This is water in Silverwood Lake that originates from Northern California. It actually originates in Lake Oroville and comes all the way through the Sacramento Delta and is transported into Southern California. As a state water contractor, we have access to this imported supply. And when we ask for it, it's delivered out of this little gate right there at the bottom of the dam. Matter of fact, here's another shot of it. So when we ask for water, matter of fact, if you happen to be traveling up to Silverwood, you'll see water coming out of that right now, probably for the next month or so. Those are deliveries that we have requested that we're purchasing, that we're taking, and that's water that will go through the dam and into our service area to replenish the aquifers. Okay, now the Forks Dam, you can see right up, hold on, there we go. Yeah, the Forks Dam, operates as a flood control facility for the Mojave River and all of our area. This is kind of a schematic. At low water level, the water just goes right through the dam. If you've ever seen the bottom of the dam, there is basically a big giant box. I got a video of that in just a moment. Water flows through. When we have storms, water backs up and it flows out the bottom of this, what's called the discharge culvert. The maximum flow, you're going to hear a lot of terms I'm going to refer to as CFS. That's cubic feet per second. That's a measurement of water flow. The maximum flow is about a little under 24,000 cubic feet per second when the water level backs up behind the dam. Okay, now here's a shot. I believe this is a video. This is probably, I mentioned the maximum flow is about 23,000 CFS. I believe this is about 12,000 CFS. I got a short little video, if you can cue that up, Neville. Yeah, so this is a shot of water coming out of the dam. You're now looking north into the Mojave drainage. I believe this was in 2000, I think 2013 storms, I believe. Yeah, so that's about 12,000 CFS, so the maximum capacity is about double that.
Is that a deep creek where that's coming?
That's below that's at the dam, so it's the confluence of Deep Creek and West Fork. It's both of those. If you go back to the schematic, we got both water coming in out of West Fork and Deep Creek flowing together, builds up behind the dam, and that's where it outlets. Okay, now this is kind of important because this is beginning to show you how we measure and how do we quantify all this information. This is what's called a hydrograph. I won't get into too much detail here, but there's a couple of different graphs. The little pink line on the bottom here is that's the inflow, and here's the outflow. This is a relatively small storm, about 4,000 CFS. So you can see a hydrograph is basically a measurement of flow over time. So the bottom x-axis is time, and the y-axis is CFS. And so you can see how, in this case, the outflow is slightly lower than the inflow. So basically what that dam does, it's doing its job. It's attenuating the storm. Water flows in faster, it builds up behind the dam, and it flows out slower. And this peak would have been higher if the dam weren't there. So this is all information that we measure. This is a real-time graph. If you go to our website during a storm, you'll be able to see these things happen real time. All of this information goes into a database. We collect that information and we utilize that to try to quantify how much water goes in and out of our system. Speaking of quantification, this is a map showing all of the gauges. These gauges are monitored by the United States Geological Survey. These are stream gauges. So a stream gauge is basically a spot in the river where we measure the flow in the river on a real-time basis. A little bit hard to see here, but this is a West Fork stream gauge. There's a little pole. There's a little transducer in here that measures the height of the water. As the water level rises, we know the relationship between height and discharge, and we can create that hydrograph that I talked about earlier. There's a little antenna on top of this that goes to wireless, and we get real-time measurements of all the different stream gauges throughout our service area. And again, these are extremely essential because these help us quantify the supply that's available to us. Quick question.
God forbid there was some type of need to control the flow of that water coming out of the dam. Are you guys able to do that?
The question is, can you control the flow out of the Forks Dam? It's called an ungated dam. And there's two ways that flow occurs. One is through that box culvert. There's kind of a safety valve called the spillway. So if the water level reaches and it reaches the top of the dam, which it never has, and exceeds the capacity to be let out of the dam, there's a big concrete spillway. If you're looking at the dam, it's on the left side as you're looking up. It's a big giant concrete runway. The water level will rise and won't overtop the dam. It'll hit the spillway first. So that's kind of the safety valve, so to speak. Okay, we talked about these hydrographs. Now this is the same kind of thing. It's a little bit different units. Now this is time on the X unit, and now we shifted units to acre feet. And this is acre feet per year. Each one of these bars is a year in duration. So what we do is we add up all of that cubic feet per second, and the volume associated with that is translated into a term called acre feet. Think of a football field 1 foot deep, and that's about 1 acre foot of water. 1 acre foot supplies a family of 4 for about 2 years if we're pretty efficient. So this is another critical way that we measure and we quantify, and it's part of the building blocks of how we manage our water. And again, it's an annual hydrograph, and there's a couple of things on here that you'll notice. One is an average, this horizontal line that goes right across the graph. Oh shoot, it goes right across the graph. That's the long-term average. What's interesting here is that you'll note, because the storms are pretty flashy and we live kind of in somewhat of a desert climate, you'll notice about 75% of the data points are below the average. So what this means is we have a lot of little storms and a few big storms that supply our water. And so this 60-year called base period is the amount of average supply that Mother Nature gives us. This is what we have to live within. This is our monthly income to our checking account, if you will, or our annual income to our checking account. And the concern that I'm going to talk about in just a moment is historically we were using more than that from our groundwater basin. And that is the term that we use in the industry of overdraft, and it also means we are using our resources unsustainably. Okay, so now part 2 of the kind of changing paradigm in our world that I referred to earlier, this kind of move towards groundwater sustainability. In 2013 was about the second year of the drought in the state, and we had, there was a lot of groundwater overdraft, using more of our groundwater supplies than what Mother Nature gives us, which results in lowering of water table. We were starting to see, because of the drought, we were starting to see an emphasis moving more and more towards using groundwater because our reservoirs were low, our rivers were low, so a lot of people moved more and more towards groundwater. As this occurred throughout the state, there was a dialogue that began to occur statewide. And so these are just some of the headlines that occurred during the spring and summer of 2013. So you can see LA Times, which never used to talk about water. None of the papers ever used to talk about water. They started referring to the whole groundwater system as the unsustainable house of cards. Northern California and the Chico area, we talked about current and pending threats to the resource. In some of the central area, what's at risk is the future of the county. Again, they're talking about the groundwater. In Southern California, down in the Coachella area, we started to see more and more declines in the aquifer, and there was a growing recognition you have to balance supplies with use. Then there was a growing recognition that we were one of the only states in the United States that really had no statewide method of regulating or managing groundwater. So there was this growing recognition of, oh my gosh, everybody else is doing it. California, it's still kind of the Wild Wild West. Everybody can do whatever they want, and there's no state oversight. So this prompted kind of a growing concern in Sacramento among our legislators. This kind of recognized that the writing was on the wall in Sacramento. This was November of 2013. And then because of that, there was a kind of a state white paper that was put out to address the emerging concerns associated with the early years of the drought. And this was in the form of the California Water Action Plan. And there's many pieces in the Water Action Plan. The one piece that was very controversial at the time was this piece right here. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but they're talking about groundwater basins, and they're talking about how they should be managed. And they're talking about how the first choice of management is local control. But if a groundwater basin is not managed sustainably, given the desire for local control, that the state should have carefully defined authority to protect the basins and its users until an adequate local program is established. This was radical. This is probably the most radical at the time discussion of groundwater management that we saw since 1914, when some of the earlier surface water laws were passed. Created a lot of consternation in the water community. Oh my gosh, what's the state's going to do? How are they going to do it? So on and so forth. Well, what happened is they passed these historic groundwater laws. And these were in the form of Senate Bill 1168, 1739, and 1319. And basically, these were all together referred to as the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act. And it commits California, okay, there's Neville's word again, you see it here, to sustainable groundwater management. So this isn't just Neville, you kind of talking, using his words. I mean, this is a buzzword throughout California, and like I said, it's creating a radically new paradigm. And like I said, probably the biggest paradigm shift in water management that we've seen in 100 years. And basically it's built on a couple of premises. One is that groundwater resources are most effectively managed at the local level that we talked about. It also recognizes a key element of science-based decision-making, that data reporting is necessary to support. And prior to this, there were many parts of the state that were not collecting any management or any data. There was little science. Again, it literally was the Wild Wild West. Lastly, as we just talked about, if a local groundwater management agency is not managing its groundwater sustainably, the state will step in. This was a really powerful, I guess one might view it as an incentive or disincentive. Nobody wants the state to come in and tell them what to do in their groundwater. So we created this Management Act, and throughout California, and then there was a provision in there that recognized that there was a lot of effective groundwater management being done. A lot of that effective groundwater management was being done in basins, groundwater basins that were adjudicated. Okay, adjudication is basically a legal process that one goes through to establish kind of who has access to how much water rights. It's essentially divvying out shares of the available natural supply. And so these were exempted from portions of the law. They were exempted from having to create a groundwater sustainable agency, and they were exempted from having to create a groundwater sustainability plan, both of which were key elements in the new laws. Okay, now I'm going to drill down a little bit to kind of our area and what does all this mean to us, and what does this mean to us in this changing world. Well, fortunately for us, there was a lot of foresight by folks that were here before I got here, and we had already gone through this adjudication process in the mid-90s. This was a very controversial process. I wasn't here, but I saw the articles and kind of dealt with the aftermath. A lot of controversy, a lot of doubt of whether or not it would really work or not. And this was completed in 1996. And essentially it set up the platform for how we manage our groundwater resources. It set up what's referred to as a water master. Now, Mojave Water Agency Board also serves as the Water Master Board. There's a little bit of difference between Water Master and Mojave Water Agency. The best way to think of the difference is Mojave Water Agency is in charge of kind of overall management and data collection. We also have access to the imported supplies. Water Master's job is quite simply as a court-appointed contract administrator. I know there's a lot of terms here, but the adjudication process led to essentially an agreement, a judgment, what's called a judgment. And the judgment is signed by all the parties that agree to be bound by the judgment. Think of the judgment as a contract. It lays out exactly the rules, who has what, how water can be traded in a market, and if you use more than your share, what happens, how do you mitigate for that? All these rules are in the judgment. And the Water Master is referred to as the court-appointed contract administrator. The judgment is the contract. It serves 5 different areas. Here is a map of the Mojave Water Agency. Here's a map of the Mojave River watershed right here, all the non-stippled areas of the watershed. You can see the Mojave River. It's broken up into 5 different sub-basins that are managed somewhat separately, but have interconnections, but have unique water supply characteristics. And here's kind of the basic building blocks of the judgment. I don't have any, this is schematic or conceptual. I don't have any scale on this, but basically there was a lot of water that was used before the adjudication process out of the groundwater basins. Okay, it was more than the safe yield. Okay, remember that hydrograph I talked about earlier that talked about our natural supply, the long-term average. That long-term average is essentially the safe yield. That was our long-term average supply that we had available to us. So the groundwater use was way more than the average long-term supply. So what we wanted to do is the goal would be to slowly reduce the rights from a position of excess, from a position of overdraft, down to where it matched the safe yield. Okay, now we didn't tell people they couldn't use more than their allocated share. We just said if you use more than your allocated share, you have to mitigate for that. Okay, here's where the imported supply comes in. So that mitigation comes in the form of water that we bring in from Northern California. So it's kind of a simple system relatively. Everybody gets a share of the natural supply, and if you use more than your share, you have to pay to purchase to mitigate that. So by bringing in imported supply that we have access as a state water contractor, by marrying that with the safe yield, we can balance our supplies and we can be sustainable. Again, Mojave Water Agency, as I mentioned earlier, is one of 29 state water contractors all through California. The state water project starts up here in Northern California. Water is stored in Lake Oroville. It's transported down through Sacramento River, goes through the Delta. It's pumped out of the Delta and serves communities in Los Angeles, Orange County, San Diego, Palmdale, Lancaster, and obviously in our service area as well. So we use this imported supply to bring in and augment and mitigate for the production that occurs greater than the safe yield. Okay, let's try to put all this stuff together. How does all this work groundwater management? Okay, here's kind of a schematic. A little bit busy here, but it's got all the pieces. We get our natural recharge. It comes primarily through the Mojave River. We have access to imported supply from the State Water Project. We're able to do artificial recharge. I'm going to talk about that in a moment. We have cities and businesses that have wells that tap into the aquifers. They pull water out and they use it to serve cities, houses, businesses. We have individual homes as well that tap into it. We have agricultural interests that tap into our aquifer, and all of these things are pulling out. So in times of drought, like we've been witnessing for the last 5 or 6 years, we have reduced flow coming out of the mountains. We potentially have reduced flow coming in from imported supplies. And what happens is the water table declines. So there was previous, water table lowers. And the goal through management activities is we know we have these hydrologic cycles. We have these wet and dry cycles. So when it gets wet again, we have more water coming out of the mountains. We have more access to water from Northern California, and we do this to we recharge our aquifers. And by doing that, hopefully, this water level goes up and down, and it kind of stays within an acceptable range. That's the whole goal when we put all these things together. Okay, and I'm going to kind of shift to the imported supply a little bit. Okay, we have our natural supply. Think of this little cylinder as a reservoir. Think of our groundwater basin as a reservoir tank that we're able to fill it and empty it using natural supply and using imported supply. Okay, now here's another hydrograph of our imported supply from the State Water Project, and you can still see the high variability. And again, we use these long-term averages to do our long-term planning, but we also have to plan for these droughts where there's disruptions in supply. And when we take our water from the imported supply, we have a number of facilities where we distribute it throughout our service area. These red lines right here are major pipelines that we have. We have about 160 miles of pipeline going from the Victorville area all the way out to Newberry Springs, also going from the Hesperia area all the way out to Yucca Valley. And at the end of those pipes, we have facilities like this. This is one of our recharge locations. This is in the Mojave River. The water that's coming out is coming out of one of these pipelines. It's originating from water in Northern California. And we're letting it go into the river. It soaks underground and it replenishes the aquifer. So this is one of our recharge facilities. This is another view of it. Okay, so the idea is we have water for homes, businesses, and agriculture. In times of drought, the reservoir goes down, and in times when it's not in drought, it comes back up and we replenish our aquifer. And like I said, hopefully, or the management goal is we manage those up and downs so that we stay within an operational range and we never permanently drain the reservoir, so to speak. Okay, again, different measurements tools. These are metrics of how we evaluate our performance. This is another graph. This is a function of time. And this is essentially the net balance in your checking account. So we add up all the water that comes out, we add up all the water that comes in. When the difference between the two is negative, your checking account balance goes down. When your difference is positive, it goes up. So this is a kind of an overall performance measure. It's called a change in storage map. It's essentially a calculated amount of how much change in water is in our groundwater basin. Like I said, when it goes negative, we're in deficit. When it's positive, we're in surplus. And again, the idea is to stay within this operational range. This is a change in storage map for what's referred to as the Alto subarea. On that map that I showed you earlier, the Alto subarea is essentially the Hesperia, Victorville, Apple Valley groundwater basins. So this one is actually faring pretty well, even though we're in the midst of a 6-year drought. Another way we measure performance is by actually measuring the water level in a monitoring well. We take instruments and we're able to find out where the water level is. We have a whole crew that tracks this, that goes out in the field and takes all these measurements. They come back to the office, and again, we create another form of hydrographs. This particular hydrograph is a function of time and water level. So this is feet below ground surface. So the ground surface is right here at 0. We have different water levels for different elevations that we measure in the groundwater basin. So we have little pipes that go down 60 feet below the ground. We have pipes that go 170 feet. We have another pipe that goes 300 feet. We have another pipe that goes 600 feet. And when we measure water levels in each of those pipes underground, this is the feet below ground surface or the water level elevation as we measure against mean sea level. So again, by taking these measurements, we can see, are we going up? Are we going down? Are we going down, down, down? Are we staying within an operational range? So these are key quantifiable pieces of information that are necessary in the overall management of our basin. Okay, the last piece is our imported supply. I want to just talk a little bit about threats. Again, we talk about long-term averages. Because of a number of factors I'm going to show you on the next slide, our long-term average over time has been going down. So our access to imported supplies is being diminished in the last decade or so. It's primarily as a result of these three components. One is we have some endangered species that get entrained and trapped into the pumps as we pump water out of the delta. So whenever there's species that are trapped, we have to slow down the pumps or turn them off. There's also seismic concerns. There's also sea level rise, and all of these three really form to impact our water supply, and they have a net result of decreasing the amount of water that we have available. Is there a solution? There is one that's being talked. It's very comprehensive, but a part of the solution is referred to as proposed tunnels, and essentially they would originate in north of the delta and be tunneled underneath the delta to where the current pumps are. And the idea behind that is if we take water in during times of surplus, we don't have to run the pumps, and we don't reverse flow, and we don't have problems of taking the endangered species into the pumps here. Now this is highly controversial, not without conflict. Quiz. Anybody know this actor? Okay, you guys are all too young. Jack Nicholson. And if you ever get the opportunity to Chinatown, yes, watch this movie. It really kind of it's an old movie. You youngsters will probably think it's really boring, but it's all about water conflict. It's all about how LA grew and the water conflict that was born out of the Owens Valley and LA. But we still see those today. Here's if you've ever driven the 5 freeway up to Sacramento or San Francisco, I'm sure you've seen these signs. This is all about this conflict in the State Water Project in the Central Valley. It's no water, no jobs. This is higher food cost. Now the folks mostly up in Northern California, are adamantly opposed to the tunnels. Save the delta, stop the tunnels. There's all kinds of protests on both sides. I love Delta Farms, kill the tunnel, build the tunnel, kill the delta. So Mojave Water Agency, as a state water contractor, is also facing a lot of big decisions ahead of us. It will be costly. This isn't our cost, but it's about to construct this facility, it's about a $16 billion facility. As a contractor, we will have to pay part of that. So we weigh the cost versus the benefits. A little bit complicated graph here, but this is kind of a core graph that we use in our long-term planning. The gold lines there are the estimated demands on the State Water Project. Again, this is the water that we need to supplement our native supply. Or these are the demands against the supply, and these are various estimates of the supply. And you can see without what's being referred to as the Cal Water Fix, we're likely going to see our supplies go down. The crossover between when our supplies meet our demands is sooner with the fix that essentially extends our supplies out. So we have a big cost in front of us, we have some potential benefits, and we have some decisions in front of us. Not only we have decisions locally, but we have decisions statewide. Like I said, there's state policy perspectives. There's no perfect solution. There's trade-offs. There's trade-offs between agriculture. There's trade-offs with urban development. There's trade-offs with economy and environmental trade-offs. And then we have local policy issues. What are the costs? Can we afford it? What are the risks? What are the benefits? And how does that impact our ability to grow economically in our area? These are all things that our community is discussing, our board of directors is discussing, and kind of big decisions in front of us. Okay, so hopefully I've tried to paint kind of the picture of locally and state. Our world is changing. In my 30-year career, I don't think I've ever seen as much change as what's occurring right now. And I think some would argue that maybe not in the last 100 years or so. So you guys that are interested in moving into this arena, moving into the environmental water arena, you're going to be entering a brand new paradigm for the state and a brand new paradigm here locally. And what I suggest or what I offer is that's opportunity. And there's all kinds of, I'm certainly not going to read all these off, but I mean you can hopefully read these. And you can see there's all kinds of disciplines that work together. And these are going to be the needs. Again, just a few, hydrologists, climatologists, biologists, construction, laboratory, database administration. We need people to collect the data. We need people to interpret the data. We need people to manage the data. We need policy people. We need people that can communicate with our community, public relations. We need geographic information system people to kind of make sense of all this incredible amount of data. All of these things are kind of essential tools in the new world. And kind of the message I've been trying to kind of spread, if you will, among the among academia, among students is don't become a specialist. The real value is people that can integrate a lot of these components together, understanding policy, understanding the technical side, and being able to put all of those things together. Those are the kinds of people we're looking for in our organization, and those are the kind of people that are going to be needed all through California, especially as this Groundwater Sustainability Act unfolds. The requirements in this new act require it to unfold over the next several decades. So this is, again, a brand new endeavor, a brand new paradigm shift, and it's going to require kind of a whole new crop, if you will, of people and skill sets. So with that, hopefully I got some time for some questions here, Neville, and I don't know how we work that, but I'm certainly open to questions, ideas, suggestions.
All right, so granted, you guys will go offline first, so do you have any questions for Kirby? Yeah, go ahead.
What happens if you can't supplement with imported water?
Okay, what happens if you can't blank with imported water? I missed that.
Supplement.
Oh, supplement. There's two potential answers to that. One is short term and one is long term. Short term is what happens if we don't have water available in a drought, basically. So we don't have water available, we can't supplement. The answer to that lies in storage. So what we do, the management concept is when we have, times when we have a lot of water, we aggressively pursue and capture that excess water and we store it underground. So it's kind of like, again, your personal bank account. I don't know, you kind of know Christmas is coming and you go out and take an extra job as a pizza delivery. So you take on a second job. You store that money away because you know Christmas is coming. And you know you're going to, buy presents, you got a big family, and you know your account is going to be depleted. So you think ahead of time and you store away, and you have the ability to store away excess so you have it in times when it's needed. So that's kind of the first thing. And that's a critical component of the overall water management here locally and throughout the state. The second is what happens when our demands exceed our supply? That is a very good question. That's a policy question. Because once that occurs, we are no longer sustainable. I would offer that probably is the point where we limit our growth. And we stop building. And some people like that, some people don't. Those are again policy discretions. But our job as water managers is to put forth accurate information available to the policymakers so they know all of this. They know how much water we have. They know its limitations. They know when we'll have it. But kind of when we no longer have enough available in the long term on a long-term average basis, this area is going to be facing some tough questions, as is all of California for that matter. And that's kind of why it's so important that California and our local area seek other methods of augmenting our supply. And one of those is using a recycled wastewater, and the other is water conservation. That line I showed you of demand as it projects out, one way to essentially extend that crossover point is by reducing that demand line. You reduce that demand line by becoming more efficient. And we've had a number of programs, and this area has been very successful in becoming more efficient with our supplies. Okay, hopefully that answers your question.
That was a fantastic question.
Yeah.
Are you sure you don't work for the state policymakers? Who was that? Who's asked that question? Anyway, so Kirby, I have a question related to that question. In this class, we're also trying to introduce how policy influences this. What sort of policy tools do you have as a manager right now to start making some of those decisions ahead of time? For example, there's a huge developer that wants to build a whole bunch of houses. I'm just using a hypothetical example here, obviously, right?
Yep, good question.
Yeah. So what tools are available? Because as policymakers, we as the people and our policymakers need to be thinking ahead, correct?
Great. Okay, the biggest tool and the most effective tool we have in its broadest sense is science. Science-based decision making, in my opinion, will produce good decisions. And it's hydrographs. It's all of the things you saw kind of embedded in there. It's how much supply do we have? How confident are we in the measurements, in the projections? So it's that fundamental science base. And I would offer that